What we're painting today. This is our watercolor painting. This is from my recent trip to Kenya. This is a sunrise on the Masai Mara when we got to go hot air ballooning, which is ridiculous. It was so much fun, and it was very, very cool. So the reference photos are just gorgeous. So we're going to be, here's the actual reference photo. If you'd like to screenshot, feel free so that you have this photo with you. You can always paint from it later. And I will hold it here for just another couple seconds, but we're going to go ahead and paint the sunrise in the background first, and then we'll go with the very simple kind of landscape in the bottom here, and then we'll paint in the hot air balloons last. So that's kind of the order that we're going to go in here. Again, this is a horizontal sort of landscape orientation painting, so if you're taping down your paper, go ahead and do it in the landscape position. You will see this again throughout the live, but I'm just going to put it off to the side for now. Okay. So for my materials, since I always get questions about this, I am using a watercolor block for my paper. So that means the paper is glued down to each other on the sides here, on the long sides, and it is not glued down on the short sides, if you can see that there. And so this just helps to keep the paper a little bit more flat as you're painting on it, and you don't have to use tape to tape it down. And it also is a good size that I can sort of fill with it, so that's why I've been using it. This is the brand is Fluid 100. It's 100% cotton watercolor paper, and it's 6 by 8 inches. And it's not that expensive if you're looking for some decent watercolor paper that is not super pricey. My paints are Winsor&Newton professional watercolor paints. These are my usuals for paint and sip. You do not have to be using professional watercolor paints. Whatever you have on hand is totally fine. And then my paint brushes are Princeton Neptune brushes. I always use these. And my small one, my little detail painting, my detail brush is from Christy Rice's Happy Painting series. She's another gal on TikTok who makes some delightful art supplies. So those are my main art supplies here. I've got my cup of water, paper towels, all that kind of stuff, and a pencil. And we will go ahead and get started with a very quick pencil sketch. Really all we need is a horizon line. So you really don't even need to do this if you don't want to, but I like to just kind of figure out where my horizon line is going to be. So I'm going to draw a very light line about 1/4 of the way up the paper. So if I just kind of divide this paper into rough quarters, it'll be about here. And I'm going to do my best to make a relatively straight line, drawing very lightly so that we don't have too many pencil marks underneath our painting there. So there's that horizon line. And again, here is the actual painting that we're basing this off of from my sketchbook, this one right here. Okay, and I think, so in this one, I think I'm going to try and make this sunrise a little bit more vibrant. So we're going to use slightly stronger colors than I used in this one. And that's what I'm going to try and change from this one to the next painting. Okay. So, and then just a reminder as we go through this painting, this is all just for fun. I will try and answer questions as I talk. It is sometimes hard to teach and paint and also answer questions. So if I miss yours, forgive me. You're welcome to ask it again, and I will hopefully catch it the second time. Feel free to help other people out in the comments if I've already answered a question. And just kind of take this easy and just enjoy this little cozy painting time that we have together. It's a nice rainy day here, and so go easy on yourself, especially if you're new to watercolor. Please be nice to me, be nice in the comments, all of that stuff, and we'll have a nice, pleasant hour together, okay? So the first thing that we're going to do is put some water into each of our watercolors here, especially if you're working with dry watercolor, but even if you're working with watercolor paint out of the tube, it is good to just add a little bit of water. It helps to start to dissolve the paint. And it just makes it way easier to work with. So just go ahead and do this. If you have a spray bottle, you can use that. I just have always used a paintbrush. I feel like it gets a little bit more water in each pan. So that's what I do. And we're gonna let that dissolve for a minute or two. And then just so you guys know, the recording of this lesson will be uploaded to my YouTube channel later. My YouTube channel is linked in my bio, or if you just search Hannah MP, you'll find me on there too, on YouTube, and all the previous paint and sips are up there too, so you can find the previous lessons if you'd like to go through those as well. Okay, so like I said before, we are going to paint the sunrise first. So that's the colors that we're going to mix first, and we're going to do a wet on wet technique, which means we're going to put a layer of clear water on our paper first, and then add those colors on top and get a nice pretty blend between those colors. So the colors that I would like you to prepare when you're ready are a blue. I like to use ultramarine blue. It's my favorite color. I use it all the time. This is going to be my sky blue. If you don't have the exact colors that I have, just whatever kind of sky blue you want to use that matches is totally fine. And you want to add a little bit of water to these paints, but just not a ton, because we want to allow for the dilution on the paper, because we're adding water to our paper, so we don't want to add too much water to our paint yet. Otherwise we're going to end up with very light paint, and we still want some color there. So there's that blue color, just ultramarine blue. And then I'm going to grab a yellow color, so I'm going to use cadmium yellow, which is this kind of golden yellow color here. Again, just whatever color's closest or whatever yellow you like from your palette is totally fine. Add a little bit of water, but not a ton. You just want that paint to flow on your palette, but you still want to have a pretty strong color. So something like that. And our last color that I'm going to use is alizarin crimson, which is a cool red. Cool red means it's closer to purple than it is to orange. So you can see this is almost like a magenta color. That's how you know it's a cool red. So whatever red you have on your palette, if you only have a warm red, that is okay. It'll still work perfectly fine. But I'm using alizarin crimson. So those are the three colors that we're going to use for the sunrise, and they're going to all blend together on the paper, and we're going to create an orange base basically between these two colors here. You can see when they mix, they create kind of an orange. Okay. So get those colors mixed up. Shouldn't be too much mixing, should just be kind of preparing the colors from your palette. Do you have water in the pans or just on the paint and brushes? Yeah, so when we started, we put some water in each of these pans and let them dissolve a little bit, and that helps to get a lot more pigment out of your pans. So there is water in there too. Okay. Now for this step, we are going to do all of these colors at the same time, because we need to put them all down there while the paper is still wet. So unfortunately, I can't pause. I can't take too many pauses in the next couple of steps here, just because we have to do it all at once. So if you'd like to watch me do it first, I will do it and explain what I'm doing, and then I will give you some time afterwards to catch up. Okay? So use a big brush. Make sure you're using a large enough brush for the size of your paper. Take some clear water and just put a layer of clear water all over the top section of your paper. So water all the way down to that pencil horizon line that we drew. You can overlap the horizon line. Don't be too careful about like painting exactly at the horizon line. We're going to be painting over it later, so it does not matter. Don't need to be too neat about it. Okay, and I am tilting my head so I can see the light reflecting off of the water. That helps me see if I've missed any spots or if there's any spots that are drying out too quickly. And you want a good layer of water here. Don't skimp on the water. Okay, especially if you live in a dry climate. It'll dry way faster if you live somewhere that is not humid. Okay, so then next we are going to, I went into the wrong color. We're going to start with the red, work our way to the yellow, and then to the blue. Okay, so start with your big brush, get into your red, and we're going to put that in just a horizontal line right at the horizon line here. And you can see that'll spread up into that water that we just put on the paper. So I'm going to keep this red pretty close to the horizon line here, and it's going to spread up into the water. And that's perfectly fine. That's what we want. Okay. Then I'm going to clean off my brush, go straight into the yellow. Do the same thing. I'm going to put it right on top of this red here. And I can do a few paint strokes to kind of start to blend it in together with that red, but I just want to let the water on the paper do most of the blending, and we can do a little blending later. Okay. And you can see how that turned orange. If you want, you can do one more stripe of yellow on top of that, just to get a little bit more of a yellow color. And then we're going to switch to our blue. And instead of going right on top of the yellow, we're going to start at the top of the paper here. Need a little bit more pigment there. Starting at the top of the paper, work our way down in horizontal strokes, letting the brush run out of paint as you get towards the yellow here. So don't refill your brush, just bring whatever you can bring down. And just kind of hit the yellow here, don't blend all the way down. Okay. If you want to, you can add a little bit of extra blue at the top if you feel like you didn't quite get enough pigment there. So I can just add a little bit of extra blue here, again working in horizontal brush strokes. Then if you feel like you have a pretty good blend here, you can leave it, or if you want to blend those colors together just a little bit better, you can use a clean, damp brush, not wet but not dry, and just start from the bottom and use horizontal brush strokes and go all the way up one time to blend all of that together. I don't want you to do it more than once. It'll start to get muddy. So just leave it once you've done that. You can also tilt your paper a little bit. That helps a gentle blend. But then after that, you're going to leave it alone. Okay? You'll have a few streaks. That's perfectly normal. We're going to add some clouds and hot air balloons over this, so it will be less obvious later. Okay? So I might tilt it a little bit just to get it blended a little bit. But again, we're not going to worry about it too much because we will be adding some stuff on top of it later. Okay, so go ahead and do that if you have not already. We're going to take a pause here so that you can catch up. Again, I'm going to just kind of explain what I just did in words so that you have not missed any instructions. So you're going to put down a layer of clear water on the top 3/4 of your paper all the way down to the horizon line that we drew. Then you're going to start with your red color, put that in a couple of horizontal stripes at the horizon line, switch to your yellow color, put that right on top of the red, and then switch to your blue color and start at the top of the paper and work your way down into the yellow section. Okay? And you can go back through with a clean, damp brush to blend all of that together, working from the bottom to the top if you want to. I would not recommend doing that more than once. Once you've done it once, just let it be what it's going to be. Okay? And if anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the comments. They don't have to be about this painting in particular. They can just be art related. I'm happy to answer questions. And you can clean up your palette as well. We're not going to use these colors again. Just started painting with you. Well, awesome. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. We're also all the way up to 5,000 likes, which I really appreciate. Again, if you have a little bit of downtime, you can double tap that screen. You can do it as many times as you want. It sends me likes, and it just helps to send this live out to more people, which helps me out a lot. What are you painting? So we are painting a hot air balloon scene from Kenya, from the Masai Mara. So this is the final painting, what it's going to look like-ish. We're going with a slightly more vibrant sunrise this time, but this is the general idea that we're going for here. Yes, this was wet on wet. So again, we put a layer of water down on the top 3/4 of this paper and then put our colors down on top, and that helps you get this really nice blend between these colors. Good question. Let me know if you've got any other questions here. Happy to answer. And then our next steps, once we're done with this, are going to be putting down our first layer in the grassland here, and then we're going to add some clouds, and then we'll add some mountains, some very distant mountains, and then the hot air balloons last, which is the focal point and the fun part of this painting. Yes, the paint palette is Winsor&Newton. I've kind of Frankensteined together my own personal palette, so it doesn't necessarily come like this. These are just the colors that I've chosen that I like to work with. And you can buy these little pans individually from the art store. So I just put together the palette that I like to use with my various favorite colors. Good question. Any other questions before we move on? What type of bristle do you prefer for your brushes? I don't really have a preferred bristle. I'm not exactly sure what these are. These are my favorite brushes, the Princeton Neptune ones. These are really nice watercolor brushes, and I think they're synthetic, but I'm not exactly sure what they're labeled as. But they just hold a ton of water, and they're so soft. And I've had these brushes for maybe 4 or 5 years now, and they still hold up perfectly fine. They don't lose hairs. They keep their shape, all of that stuff. So I appreciate that, not having to buy new brushes. Why prime all the colors in your palette? Also a good question. You just never know which colors you want to use. And putting water in them does not hurt them. They'll just dry back out, and you can keep doing that. So I just do that because I don't know which colors I want to use through the painting. I might use a random one that I might not expect, and I want it to be ready for me to use. Do I need it to use a blow dryer to dry it? You absolutely can. I usually don't for these paint and sip lessons, just so that we can keep on track with everybody and so that you guys don't have to listen to a hairdryer. I've used it sometimes, but when I'm painting just for myself, I use a hairdryer all the time because I am impatient. All right, those are all good questions. Thank you so much. Specific type of paper used for water paint. Yes, so it's watercolor paper specifically. It is made to be way thicker than normal paper that you would, come across in your daily life, so that it can absorb lots of water and paint. Yeah, I think it's synthetic squirrel. So yeah, if you're gonna work with watercolor, you at least want mixed media. That's usually a little bit thinner, but it'll still work, but you probably would prefer watercolor paper. It'll be labeled as watercolor paper, and that's what you can use for watercolor painting. All right, we are gonna go ahead and move on so that we can kind of keep moving through this landscape painting here. All good questions. We will get back to questions later. We are going to put our first layer down on this grassland area. And because this is kind of a sunrise, we're gonna have some pretty dark, muted greens here. So this is gonna be a fun little watercolor paint mixing session here. So we're gonna mix two colors. We're gonna mix a slightly lighter green and a slightly darker green. So just stay with me here. We're gonna start with sap green for both. This is just kind of the base. So it's just kind of a normal like grass green color. And for the lighter green, we are going to add some yellow ochre, which is kind of a natural yellow color. Some burnt sienna, which is kind of an orange color. And this helps to dull down the color. So burnt sienna is kind of the opposite on the color wheel from green, and it makes it a little bit more brown. And that's what we want. So yellow ochre, burnt sienna, or just orange. If you don't have burnt sienna, orange will work just fine. And then a little bit of blue. I like to use ultramarine blue. Whatever blue you have in your palette will work. Just a little bit of it though. And I want you to keep these colors pretty concentrated, so not adding too much water to the paints here. Enough that they flow, but not so much that they're super watered down, okay? So there's our quote-unquote light green, and it's gonna be light compared to the next color we're gonna mix, but it's still like a pretty mid-tone color. I appreciate the help. Thank you so much. Okay, so that's our first color. Again, that was starting with sap green, adding yellow ochre, burnt sienna, and a little bit of blue. Okay, our next color is going to be eerily similar, just different proportions. So we're again going to start with sap green. I always just really dig my brush into these colors to get a lot of pigment out of them. You don't need to be gentle. And then we're going to add some blue. I'm going to use the same blue that I used before, so ultramarine blue. This helps to darken that color. And then we're going to add some brown as well. And this will dull down that color as well. Add plenty of brown, plenty of blue, and you should come up with kind of a natural looking dark green. Okay, I'll go over those color mixes again once we're done with this darker green. There we go. Swatch that for you. So we've got our lighter green and our darker green. They're not very dissimilar from each other, but we just want to have a little bit of color variation here. Okay. So once you've got those colors mixed, we are just going to fill in the bottom section of our paper with a flat wash. And we're not going to add water to the paper first. We're going to paint on dry paper, starting with our light green. And with this one, you're going to make your horizon line. So I would recommend being like a little bit careful about how flat it is, but it doesn't need to be perfect. So I'm just going to somewhat slowly paint in my horizon line with this lighter green. Again, doesn't need to be perfect, but I'm just kind of making a flat-ish line. Okay, and then we can fill in basically the top half of this green section here. Then I'm not even going to wash my brush. You don't need to. Just switch into the dark green, fill in the bottom half. And I like to use the dark green and some horizontal brush strokes to just add a little bit of texture here. So I might go up into the light green section and just add a little bit of texture, really concentrate that dark green down here at the very bottom. If you want some brownie points, this is not required. You can take some burnt sienna or yellow ochre, really any color that we just used to mix these greens, and throw that in here too while this is still wet. That just gives you a little bit more color variation here. You can do that same thing with blue. You can use that to darken up the bottom even more, or again, just use horizontal strokes and just throw that color in. Okay, and you can do this as long as the paper is wet. So as long as that paint that we just put down is still wet, you can continue to do this, throw in as many colors as you want, or if that's too overwhelming, just stick with those two greens that we just mixed, and that is perfectly fine. I'm gonna go ahead and stop there, and we're gonna let that dry. Okay, so we've got kind of our background painted here. After this is dry, well, actually, this doesn't really need to dry for us to do our next step, so I'm just going to give you a minute or two to finish that, and then we'll move on to our next step, which is going to be some clouds in the sky here. Yes, this is watercolor. Let's see if I missed any comments. Why use blue and not black to make darker? That's a great question. So I actually don't have black in my palette here. The darkest color I have is Payne's Gray, which is a bluish, really blue-toned gray. I'll show you a little swatch of that. So this is the darkest color that I have. And you can see if you water it down, it's kind of like a blue color. I don't like to use black because I find that it dulls down the colors. So if you use other colors to darken your paints, you'll still have a fairly saturated, meaning lots of color, hue. And that's a personal preference. Some people like to use black. I have nothing against using black to darken your colors. But for me personally, I just like to use blue or brown or that Payne's Gray to create the dark colors. Hopefully that makes sense. Do you rinse off your brush when you switch to reaching for a different color? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes I'm a little lazy. I do try and give it at least a little bit of a rinse, especially if I'm going for the yellow colors here. Just a quick rinse. But sometimes I don't. But these colors are so concentrated that getting a little bit of a different color into them is not going to change the pigment in each of these pans. So it's not that big of a deal. Sorry, just have to block some people sometimes. All right. Do you prefer watercolor or acrylic paint? I always prefer watercolor. I really don't use acrylic paint all that much. It just dries too fast for my taste, so I don't use it very much. Alrighty. So, certainly not last. Next step here, we are going to mix up a purple color to add some nice little clouds in the sky here. So you can see these clouds that I painted in here. That's our next step. All right, so back to our palette here, more color mixing. We're gonna make a muted purple color. So I'm gonna start with ultramarine blue. Add a little bit of alizarin crimson, which again is that cool toned red. I'm just going to do that slowly because I want it to still be pretty blue toned purple. And then I'm going to add a little bit of burnt sienna. That's going to be too much. Again, burnt sienna will neutralize this purple a little bit. Just make it look a little bit more natural. And I just want this thing to lean more blue. So we're going to add more blue than burnt sienna or red. Okay, and we're going to add plenty of water to this as well because we want it to be pretty watered down, pretty subtle. And your color does not have to match mine exactly. I'm just giving you the colors that I'm mixing, but just mix whatever purple you want to use. It's kind of a grayish purple. Okay. When you've got that, switch to a smaller brush. And whenever you're ready, I can zoom you in a little bit. We are going to add some clouds. So I'm going to use horizontal strokes here. These are kind of streaky horizontal clouds. So I'm going to start here at the bottom and just start adding. We're going to carefully kind of paint around the horizon line here. And I'm just going to do little sections at a time. And I'm just using really light horizontal strokes here and just kind of building the clouds gradually. And as the paintbrush runs out of paint, you'll get some really nice streaks, which will look really natural. So feel free to just let your brush run out of paint every once in a while, and you'll get some really nice textures there, very natural like that. Here, maybe we'll add a couple that don't quite connect. And then continue moving across the paper here. I'm just using a really light touch and just the tip of my brush to create these streaky clouds. And we're not bringing them up very high. They're going to stay here kind of down closer to the horizon line. But I like to make them a little higher at the edges instead of in the middle. It kind of filters the viewer's eye towards the middle of the painting. Again, just allowing our brush to run out of color. You can add a few little streaks here. And whenever you feel like you've added enough clouds, go ahead and stop. You don't want to overdo it. Something like that. Okay. Oh my God, we've got a lot of people. Hello, everybody. Hope you're all enjoying. Left to right, top to bottom strokes important. Nope, doesn't matter, just horizontal. Whatever way is more comfortable for you. Do we have to wait for the bottom layer to dry before applying the new layer? So for this, we just had to wait for the sky to dry. The grass section didn't really have to be dry. We're going to cover that seam up later. So I just waited for the sky section to be dry. I missed how you made the light purple. It was blue, red, and a little bit of burnt sienna, which is kind of an orange color. Mostly blue, just a little bit of red and burnt sienna. Okay. I missed your book. I got your book. It's beautiful. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. That reminds me, this is a good time to plug the book. So as you're finishing adding your clouds, I do just want to mention I have a book out this year. It came out in April, which is super exciting. I'm an author. And this book is 24 landscape lessons, just like this paint and sip. They're just in written form, so you can take them at your own pace. And we've got quite a few really fun little landscape lessons in here. One of my favorites is back here. Hang on, here it is. This one is one of my favorites. Little sunset, Washington sunset with these trees in the foreground. So if you're enjoying this paint and sip and you're interested in some more landscape lessons from me, please do feel free to check out my book. If you click on the link in my bio, the top link in there will take you right to buying this. It's also available anywhere you buy books, so Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Target, Walmart, all of that. So wherever you like to buy a book, it does not matter where you buy it. I get the same benefit regardless. And I've heard that people are really enjoying it. So I hope you will check it out if you have not already, and keep painting some landscapes with me. So thank you all for listening to my little plug. Let's make sure we didn't miss any comments here. Thank you all, and thank you all for the likes as well. We're up to 20,000. So helpful. Thank you so much. I hear your voice when I read the description. Thanks. Thank you all for the nice comments on the book. I do really appreciate the people who have bought it already. For my last report from my publishers, I had sold over 3,500 copies. 3,500, which is super cool. I did not imagine that would happen in the first couple of months. So thank you to everyone who bought the book. And if you haven't bought it already, lots of people have enjoyed it so far. So I hope you check it out as well. And thank you all for supporting me in that way. Just ordered the book right now. Thank you so much. And if you're watching later on YouTube, all of the links that I talk about are going to be in the description, so you can just find them there. I just went to Amazon and ordered it. God, you guys are just the best. I don't know what I did to deserve you guys. This is awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was a labor of love, and I'm really, really proud of it, and I hope people like it. Alrighty. How's everyone doing? If you're painting with me, please let me know how this painting is going for you so far. Is the book translated to other languages? It is not yet. My publisher said that I need to hit a certain number of sold copies before that starts to happen. So that's not, unfortunately, it's not up to me. But if we sell enough copies, or if it gets really popular in a certain country, then there are opportunities to translate it for other languages. You were just yourself. Oh, thank you so much. You guys are so sweet. I might be guilty of too many blue clouds. That's okay. No, too many clouds never hurt anybody. Alrighty. Struggle to get the clouds to hit the right opaqueness, but it's working out all right, I think. Good. Again, like once we finish the painting, things will kind of even out. Sometimes when you are halfway through the painting, something looks way too bright or way too prominent, but then once you finish the painting, it kind of pushes it back. So reserve judgment for the end. I just want to make sure everybody's doing okay and enjoying the live so far. We're going to add some mountains in the distance here to disguise this seam. So whenever you're painting landscapes like this, where you have a sky and land that meet, you'll end up with this kind of awkward seam in between those two sections. So I like to, even if it's not in the painting, or it's not in the reference photo, I like to use mountains to kind of disguise that and just kind of make it a little bit more seamless. So you can always try that in your own paintings as well, and that's what we're going to do right now. So we're going to make a muted blue color, kind of a blue-gray color, and we just have to mix up two colors, and those colors are blue and brown. So I'm just going to clear a spot in my palette here and mix up a little bit of ultramarine blue. And I'm just going to add in a little bit of brown at a time. And as you add in the brown, it'll create kind of a bluish gray color. If you go too far with the brown, you'll get a very gray color, but we want to keep this a little bit more blue. So just add a little bit at a time. This is probably good. And you'll end up with this muted blue color. Go ahead and add some water too. We don't want it to be too strong. These are mountains in the distance. So that's what that looks like. Would it be okay to use gouache as the watercolor? Absolutely, yeah. Gouache is fun because you can water it down and it acts very similar to watercolor. Okay. Just making sure. I'm just reading through all your comments, sorry. Weekly classes for beginners. So these paint and sips are every 2 weeks, usually every other weekend. They're usually on Saturdays. I had something to do yesterday, so couldn't do it. But usually I've gotten on a schedule of close to every other weekend. Yes, it is paperback. The book is. Is there a difference between Winsor&Newton Cotman and professional? Yes, and I would personally say, having tried the Cotman watercolors, that the professional watercolors in that brand, if you're going to go with that brand, are worth the extra money. I find the Cotman brands to just be way less pigmented. And so if you have the funds and you want the Winsor&Newton brand, I would highly recommend the professional watercolors over the Cotman. Again, there are other like brands where you can get cheaper watercolors that are perfectly high quality as well. But for this brand in particular, I like the professional ones way more than the Cotman ones. Okay, so with our muted blue here, we're just going to add a mountain range in the distance. And you can make it as big as you want. I'm going to make mine pretty small here. And the thing I'm going to focus on is just creating a nice, just neat horizon line here. So it doesn't have to be perfectly flat, like I said before, but I just want it to be covering that seam that I just talked about here. And so that's what I'm going to kind of focus on here. So we're just using a small brush and just working our way across the paper. You can always add another mountain layer in front of this one if you want a little bit more depth. We might do that later. And I'm just using kind of a wavy line for the top of the mountain range in the distance here. Doesn't need to be anything too dramatic. Okay, can always go back over, clean it up a little bit. But I think that element just helps to pull those two sides of the world together. You can do that, you can do the same thing with like a line of distant trees. What else works? I've definitely done trees to do the same thing. Small hills like this. Yeah, I think those are the two main things that will kind of help you disguise that seam. Can you say what size brush to use, please? I'm a beginner. So I would recommend getting a couple of different brush sizes. I would recommend a larger brush, so something like this would be good. Like this is a 3/4 inch flat brush, so you can see it's got this shape. Something that will help you get a lot of water or color on your paper. And then I'd recommend a medium-sized brush, so like this size 10 brush, or this 1/2 inch oval brush is a good medium brush that I've been using. Something like this. You can see that they're smaller than this large brush. It does also cover problematic lower clouds. That is very true. You can use it to cover up things. And then I would recommend some smaller brushes. So I like to use this 4 round for some details, and I like to have like a 2 round or a 0 round for details as well. So really you need like 3 brushes, I would say. You really don't need any more than that. Now, when you go into the art store and you see the brush section, do I want more brushes than that? Absolutely, and I do buy them. But if you're just starting out, a small, medium, and a large brush will work out perfectly fine. Do you ever use heat guns or blow dryers to speed up drying? Yes, absolutely. I have my hair dryer. It lives in here in my art studio, not in the bathroom. I hardly ever use it for my hair. I just use it for my watercolors because I am impatient. So I just use it for drying up the layers between watercolors. Okay. How's everyone doing? Have I left anybody behind? Are we moving along pretty well? Here's our reference painting. I bought several brush sets and I really only use 2 or 3 of maybe 20. Yeah, exactly. Everybody has their favorites. And I have a whole mug of brushes over here, and I use like 2 or 3 of them most of the time. But it's so fun to buy new brushes. Okay. So we've got, I think, like 2 more details here. I'm going to give you a few options of like some other details that you can add. But I think next we'll go ahead and add the hot air balloons. So this is going to be the fun part. So our first color, the color that we need to mix up, is a gray color. I'm going to use the Payne's gray that we talked about earlier. Hello, hello. Hardly ever use it for my hair. Yeah, absolutely. Who needs, artists don't need hair. I don't need good hair. I just sit here in my studio all day. Nobody's seeing me. So I'm going to mix up a fairly pigmented Payne's gray here. If you don't have gray, Payne's gray, black and blue works perfectly fine. Or you can mix up like a dark gray with that blue and brown mixture that we were just doing, just more even ratio. But this Payne's gray is a nice, just kind of dark gray color. Pretty. Indigo works perfectly fine too, yes. Okay, now if you need to sketch out these hot air balloons, you totally can. If you want to just freehand it, go for that as well. They're kind of shaped like this. Actually, let's show you the reference photo so you can actually see what they look like. They are flatter on the top than you'd expect. So that's the detail that I'm going to sort of work on here. So you can see if we zoom in on this guy, it's not like an egg shape. It's more of like a flat top and then It's almost kind of a triangle shape with rounded edges. So you can put as many hot air balloons in there as you want. There is probably a point where you get too many hot air balloons. So I would recommend some restraint in that area. I'm gonna paint this main one here that's closer and so it's bigger, and then paint in a few more that are in the distance. They can go down on the land here, or they can just all be in the sky. You can be in charge of, yeah, teardrop is a good way to put it. You can be in charge of where to put them. I will leave that up to you. You can also be in charge of how many you put in your landscape. I would just caution you against adding too many. How long until you upload this to YouTube? It'll be uploaded later today. Most likely, as long as my Wi-Fi and TikTok agree with me. So, this is where we are brave, and we just kind of go for it, because we have this lovely sky, and we're gonna put a black dot in the middle of it. So, here we go, here it goes. And I like to start in the center. When I'm painting these freehanded, I will usually start in the center and just kind of work the edges outward. And that way I can kind of adjust as I go. I'm not like doing an outline and then thinking like, oh, that's not a good outline, I don't like that. So I like to kind of push the pigment out from the center. And that way I can adjust as I go. So we're gonna bring it down to a point here, and then add just a little dot at the bottom for the basket. The basket is so small, you really won't be able to see much more than a dot. And I think I'm gonna make this a little wider. And just clean up the edges here. And call it good before we start to get perfectionisty and start to kind of overwork it here. It's okay for it to just be a little bit imperfect, right? There we go. I'm gonna leave it. Okay. Oh, but I really want to mess with it. Okay, we're gonna move on. Move on to a different one. Maybe I'll put a smaller one down here. For the smaller ones, I will just kind of do an outline, because the shape isn't quite as important. They're much further away. And for the smaller ones, I don't even do a dot at the bottom. They're too far away to really even see the basket down there. But you can if it looks weird, if you want to. Just a little tiny dot. I'm holding my breath. Me too. I can barely talk. Okay. So again, just add as many hot air balloons as you desire. You can always water down this Payne's gray as well. That helps to kind of make them look like they're more in the distance here. Okay. There's a good one. Maybe we'll put one over here. Thank you all for the likes as well. I can see them streaming in out of my peripheral vision. I appreciate it. We're gonna have to do a check. Oh my God, we're almost at 30,000. That's really awesome, you guys. Thank you so much. Okay. I think I'm gonna stick with 5. I think that looks pretty good. You can add little stripes to them if you want. I might adjust this one just a little bit more. Okay. And now I just want to paint. You can paint later. You must be in a city. I am. I'm kind of in the suburbs, but we got a lot of cars going by, kind of on a main road. But honestly, I don't really hear it anymore. If I painted this following the TikTok you made about... Oh, good. Nice. I'm glad you did the TikTok. All right. So we are getting to the end here. Let's see. I think let's add one more mountain layer in front of these, just for funsies. And then we can add some details on the grass, and then we can be done. So I'm going to... and if you're still working on hot air balloons, you can either continue working on them and ignore me for the next couple of minutes, or you can just kind of move on. You can always come back to adding more hot air balloons. We're not adding any more details in the sky, so that's the last thing. So you can just kind of leave it and come back and add more if you want to later. But for the mountain layers, I'm just going to make a slightly more pigmented version of the color that we made before. So that was ultramarine blue and brown. You can see it's just slightly darker than the color that we made before. And I'm going to use a smaller brush, my smallest brush. And you can either add a mountain range going all the way across, or you can just kind of add another layer halfway across here, which is probably what I'm going to do. And I'm just creating one more hill, slightly shorter than the other one, just right in front here. All right. And by the way, this painting is going to be for sale later. For these paint and sips, I always offer to sell these on my Instagram story for cheaper than they would be if I were to put them on Etsy, because Etsy takes a sales fee. So I will be selling this painting for $40, which is a steal. I do that because these are just lessons and not like finished paintings. And I will be posting that on my Instagram story later. So if you are interested in purchasing this painting and want a original art piece for just a little bit less than it would normally be, please just check out my Instagram a little bit later. Same handle as TikTok, so you can find me just that way. And whoever DMs me first will get it. So if you want it, just make sure you send me a DM. It'll be $40 just for people in the US because of shipping. It'll be free shipping. Yeah, so I just wanted to let you guys know that. If you're interested in this painting, you can get it. It'll be available right after the paint and sip is over on my Instagram story. All right. Is there a method to seal or protect a watercolor painting? Not really. Some people have some ways, but it's not really like necessary, to be honest. The paint, once it's dry, doesn't really go anywhere. And I imagine you're just going to put it in a frame or something like that, or just put it on a desk and it'll live like that. So you don't really need to seal it or protect it. What palette of paint do you purchase with these colors? That's a good question. So this palette comes from Winsor&Newton, and I created this palette just based on the colors that I like to use. So you can't, there you go. You can also remove the comments. You can clear the display of comments. So I created this palette, you can buy these pans individually, and I just made it to be the colors that I like. YouTube channel is Hannah MP, and it's also linked in my bio. If you go to the link tree and just scroll down, it'll be there, so you can find it that way too. Okay, last detail so that we can get out of here somewhat on time. We are going to mix up a dark green, extra dark, and we're going to add some little trees and stuff, just little details in the grass section here, just to spice things up a little bit. So same recipe for dark green that we used last time. We're just going to add less water and a little bit more blue. So sap green, ultramarine blue, plenty of blue, and some brown. And this will just help to darken up that green color without using black. Yes, this will be posted later today on YouTube, so if you missed it or if you want to try again, it'll be posted later today, and you can do it on your own time. It would mean a lot to me if you guys subscribe to my YouTube channel, if you watch those paint and sips all the way through, even if you just have them on mute and just play them in the background of something. It really helps me out. I'm trying to get monetized on YouTube, and you have to hit certain requirements, one of which is watch hours. So if you're feeling generous and just want to pop one of those on, first of all, subscribe, and then second of all, just pop one of those on. You don't even have to listen to me, just on mute, and that'll really help me out too. And thank you so much for anyone who does that. Okay, so with this really dark green here, I'm just going to find a spot where I want to add some little trees and just kind of dot my brush along the paper here. In this area, the trees grow along the river's only really, and so I'm just kind of creating like a distant river pattern with this color and just kind of fading it out to little dots and dashes as I get to the distance here. So I might add like more trees that are bigger down here and do it in kind of 2 rows here, and then just kind of fade it out as you get up to as you go kind of towards the distance here. Just did. Thank you so much. You guys are the best. You can also just add some little, there's a couple individual trees that kind of grow on the Mara, so you can add those, or just some little lines here. So I'm just going to add a few of these little details just to kind of add a little interest to this area down here. Just helps to kind of break up this large area of green. What website to use for prints? So, I mean, I sell all of my art and prints and stuff on Etsy, but I make all my prints myself. So I have a printer and a scanner, and I create my prints on my own here. I used to use a website called I Print From Home, which was awesome as well. I just wanted to have a little bit more control and a little bit more like quicker turnaround time. So it is called I Print From Home. I would highly recommend if you are looking for just like some one-off prints. They do drop shipping as well. Okay, so we're just adding these little trees here. And while we're doing this, I will just do my usual plugs, which you'll hear again at the end. If you go to the link in my bio, you'll find many things. You will first of all find the link to my watercolor book that just came out in April. So again, if you are looking for some more tutorials just like this one, it is basically these paint and sips in book form. It is called Watercolor Wonderlust, and you can buy it anywhere that you buy books, including the link in my bio. People have seemed to be really enjoying it, and it was a labor of love, and I'm very proud of it. So if you're looking for another way to kind of learn how to paint these landscapes like I do, you can check that out. And that would mean a lot to me. You will also find in that link tree in my bio a link to my Etsy shop. So that's where I sell all of my paintings, prints, postcards, bookmarks, all of that kind of stuff. And it would mean a lot to me if you check that out as well. Those make great gifts. They also just make little things for yourself if you like bookmarks, or if you're looking to decorate something, put a piece of art on there. And that means a lot to me. I am a full-time artist, so it does help a lot for people to support my art when they can. I've also got my Patreon in there. If you're looking for, you'll get some monthly art as well as a exclusive tutorial just like this one, pre-recorded, that you can work through on your own time. So if you're looking for that, you can join my Patreon. It is not very expensive. If you just want the tutorial, it is $3.50 a month. So if you'd like to support me just in that way, that is always super helpful as well. The last thing I'll mention in there is the tip jar. So these paint and sips are free, and I will continue to make them free. But if you do want to leave me a tip or a gift for today's lesson, that is always super, super helpful. And I very much appreciate it. So if you'd like to leave me a tip, you can scroll down to the bottom of my link tree, and there's a tab there called Tip Jar, and it makes it really easy to leave me a tip if you're so inclined. Any amount is perfectly fine, and I really, really appreciate it if you choose to do that. Again, these lives are free, but I do appreciate if you would like to leave me a gift or tip. And lastly, this live will be uploaded to YouTube later today, probably, as long as the Wi-Fi and everything agrees with me. So you can always go subscribe to my YouTube channel. That's also linked in my bio. Also just called Hannah MP. And you can find the previous paint and sips there, and this one will be uploaded there later today. Please do subscribe there. I'm trying to post a little bit more on there. And, you know, watch the paint and sips helps me out with my watch time and all that kind of stuff. I think that is what I was going to say. Lastly, this painting, like I was talking about before, will be available later today on my Instagram story. If it does not sell for my Instagram story, it'll go on Etsy, but it'll be slightly more expensive because I do have to account for the fees that Etsy takes. So if you'd like this painting, it will be $40 on my Instagram story. It is first come, first serve, so whoever DMs me first will get it. And it'll get shipped to you, US only, and you'll just pay via Venmo or PayPal, whatever you want to do. Okay, any other questions before we kind of sign off here? I hope you really enjoyed this session. I really love painting with you guys, and I hope you enjoy your painting. I hope it turned out well for you. And these lives happen every other weekend usually. So the next one will be in 2 weeks, and it's usually on Saturdays at 3 p.m. Eastern time. This time it had to be on Sunday because I had something to do yesterday. But usually Saturdays, 3 p.m. Eastern time, there will be an announcement on my TikTok and like a live event little thing so you can see if there's one that day. So you can always just check beforehand. But otherwise, just kind of assume every other weekend. And I'm going to go ahead and remove, actually, I'm going to go ahead and sign this painting first. I'm going to do that with gouache because it just helps to show up when I've got a nice, I always sign in this corner here. And it just helps to have a nice light color when you have dark paint there. So I just use a little bit of my white gouache. And I might add it to my green just to make kind of a more cohesive color with the rest of my painting. And just sign the painting down here. Oh, perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Yeah, I appreciate anybody running my YouTube videos just as background noise. You don't have to have the sound on. It just helps me with my watch time. I'm trying to get monetized, and it's been a bit of a slog. Thank you guys. You guys are so nice. And we also got up to 37,000 likes, which is really awesome. Thank you so much. And I always love to know that you guys had fun and enjoyed the tutorial. That's why I do these, and just kind of interact with you guys in a little bit closer of a way. So thank you for joining me as always. So for these watercolor blocks, they're bound with glue on each side, so I just use a palette knife and scrape it along that bond, and then that frees that piece of paper up there. Do the same thing on this side. And then it does leave a little bit of glue, like on each side. There's like a little layer of, you can see like a light color, there's a little layer of glue. So I just use an X-Acto knife and cut that off later. So there is that final painting. I think that turned out